It is now being reported that David may officially be a suspect in connection with the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. After this missing girl's decomposed body was found in his car 2 months ago, this is a major development. Strange, considering recent reports, but major nonetheless. Oh, and TMZ is now reporting that LAPD may now be looking at this as a homicide case. If all of this is in fact true, what does this mean for him and this investigation? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Real quick, before we go any further, gotta say this. If you're in the content creation game, have you ever wondered how we're able to get these stories, these clips out so fast? I'm gonna give you a secret. It's something called Opus Clip. This is an all-in-one AI editor that makes it so easy to cut, create, and upload videos across any platform through AI. Opus Clip generates B-roll, it reframes footage, it cleans up audio, it is easy. You just visit opus.pro/sidebar, you sign up, you upload, and in minutes you will have perfectly edited clips ready to go. For TikTok, Shorts, Reels, Opus Clip is your one-stop shop. Having a tool like Opus Clip means our producers can get you viral courtroom updates instantly. This is the most powerful tool there is to help you share ideas and edit like a pro. So go to opus.pro/sidebar to create your videos today. And for November only, you can get 65% off of an annual plan. Anyone else have whiplash right now? The back and forth on this story is so confusing, to say the least. I mean, we just reported yesterday that TMZ came out and confirmed that the LAPD told them that there were no arrests that are imminent in the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, whose decomposed body was found in a Tesla that was registered to singer David. Her body was found September 8th. But now, outlets like TMZ and ABC News, they have just reported that sources confirmed to them that David, real name David Anthony Burke, is now considered a suspect. Now, the LAPD didn't come out and say this for sure. They didn't confirm it, but this is what is being reported. And TMZ, by the way, reported that they are being told that the LAPD is in fact looking at this as a homicide investigation. And they even cite how a source is reportedly telling them that the investigation found that David allegedly took a trip in spring 2025 to this remote area in Santa Barbara County, was there for several hours. TMZ does warn, though, that they haven't double-sourced this information, but it should be noted, we don't know when Celeste died. Reporting indicates that she may have been dead for quite some time. Steve Fisher, the private investigator who was hired by the owner of the property that David was staying at, which is near where the Tesla was found, he said there's proof of life photo of Celeste from January 2025. Publicly, though, there have been no confirmed videos or photos of Celeste since 2024. Now, all of this new reporting, I have to be clear, all of this new reporting, we can't 100% confirm if this is true. In fact, E! News claims they contacted the LAPD for comment, but a spokesperson said they couldn't confirm this reporting because this is an ongoing active investigation. This idea that David is a suspect, that is backed up also by NBC4 Los Angeles, who says they spoke to an LAPD source with direct knowledge of the investigation. By the way, the same source who confirmed that David is no longer cooperating with law enforcement in this case. Again, that's the allegation. LAPD hasn't come out and said that officially, but we got to talk about this. And I actually want to read you, before I even get into that, I want to read you a direct quote from NBC4 Los Angeles. Quote, police tell NBC4 investigates that Celeste's death likely occurred in the spring and that David likely had help in dismembering and disposing of the body. To be clear again, no arrests have been made as of yet, okay? Why this is so confusing, aside from what I just mentioned with TMZ reporting that LAPD told them there's no imminent arrests, LAPD told KTLA, what was it, last week, that they stand by their prior news release. That, quote, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner has not yet determined the cause or manner of Ms. Rivas Hernandez's death. As such, it remains unclear whether there's any criminal culpability beyond the concealment of her body. So is the reporting suggesting that he is the suspect in the concealment of the body, something more? And by the way, that is true. When it comes to the ME, it doesn't appear that there is a change, that this manner and cause of death have been listed or have been determined. Once that comes in, though, once the toxicology results come in, we're going to have a better understanding of what happened here. But according to ABC, their sources say the ME will, in fact, make a determination soon. And ABC News is reporting that, according to sources, Celeste, this girl from Lake Elsinore, California, who was reported missing last year, her body was dismembered when it was found in that car, and that the dismemberment and the disposal likely involved more than one person, and that law enforcement have been in touch with several people who are somehow connected or involved in this case. What do we make of this? Let me bring in Colin L. Schmitt, retired FBI agent, president, CEO of Kronos Litigation Experts. Thank you so much for coming on. What does it mean to be a suspect? Let's start there. What's the definition of a suspect?
Well, a suspect means they have predicated an investigation in the person. So that's kind of lower, or a reasonable suspicion. So they have a reasonable suspicion that the person may be involved in a crime. They don't necessarily have probable cause or beyond a reasonable doubt, but right now they're at the point of reasonable suspicion. So now that means they're ramping up their resources to really lean in on this person, if in fact they are a suspect, because that has not been confirmed officially by LAPD.
Would they confirm it? Like, you think they'll come out today, tomorrow, and say, yes, he's a suspect?
No, they're not going to do that. In fact, I'm sure the district attorney's office is a bit irritated that these leaks are coming out, if in fact they are truthful and they are confirmed, because it impacts their ability to move forward with their investigation. Because now that if he indeed is a suspect, then everybody around him is going to be ready when law enforcement starts knocking on their doors, if they haven't already knocked on their doors.
Can you expand upon that? Why is that such a danger to label him as a suspect at this point? Is the idea people, like you said, people won't talk, he might do something? Again, we don't know for sure, but what is the danger of him being publicly labeled a suspect?
Well, the first part is everybody in his circle is going to lawyer up, because if they have any information about this, they're going to protect themselves, if indeed he is a suspect. Secondly, it provides a danger to law enforcement. Now everybody's kind of on edge. So when they go knock on those doors, if the person that they thought was a witness was culpable or participated in this, it could be a danger to that law enforcement when they're knocking on the door, if that person wants to protect themselves from being found out. So when these leaks happen, it's really frustrating as a retired law enforcement officer to see this, because it just makes the job of the detectives that much harder.
If he is in fact a suspect, does law enforcement know where he is right now? Because we don't know where he is.
I would make the assumption they do. They've probably been tracking him per se since the day the body was found, and they identified him as being the owner of the car. But we don't know if he's in the United States or if he's in some foreign country. And depending on which foreign country it is, if he is in fact a suspect and he is charged, then they're going to have to go through a process of extradition, which could make this case go on for a very long time.
Does a suspect always lead to an arrest?
No. So like I said, it's a reasonable suspicion. And so those homicide detectives with LAPD, which my biased opinion are probably the best in the world, they're going to run down every single lead to make sure that they have the right person. And they're also going to look into hypotheses that don't lead to him to make sure they have the right person, because ultimately their goal is to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. So they can't just go out and decide, okay, this is a suspect, and then focus their entire investigation on him or her. They have to run out all the leads to make sure they have the right person.
When I mentioned whiplash before, you can understand why I said that, right? I mean, if the reporting, you take all the reporting is true, that LAPD comes out and said there's no arrests that are on the horizon, and yet now it's being reported he may be a suspect. Can two things be true at once? Can he be a suspect, but there's no arrest that's imminent?
Absolutely. So like I said, they still have to do their investigation. They don't want to arrest anybody and then have to release them because they got the wrong person. So they're still gathering their information. They're still interviewing people. They're still waiting for the ME or the toxicology reports to come back, because somebody of this profile, and then frankly, they've been burned in the past by pulling the trigger, so to speak, too soon. The DA's office wants to make sure all the ducks are in a row before they move on anybody that's involved in this.
Before I even go into, this possibly being investigated as a homicide, if this is true, do you think he's been a suspect for quite some time? Why do I say that? Do you think David knew that he was being classified as a suspect? If it's true, we don't know for sure. Hired Blair Burke, this high-powered criminal defense attorney to very prominent stars, hired her last month, transferred homes to his mother's name. Do you think it is possible that we may only now be learning that he's classified as a suspect? It's not been official. LAPD hasn't come out and said it yet. But is it possible that he's been declared a suspect for quite some time?
Well, in the concept of declaring a suspect, I think the LAPD doesn't declare maybe a person of interest would be the at the best where they've officially declared somebody a part of the investigation. But the bottom line or the logic here is all the data points were pointing to him based specifically upon him being the owner of that car and then occupying the residence that was near where the car was found. So as soon as that was leaked or came out in the media, I'm sure that's when he hired his lawyer, and I'm sure that's when he started taking actions to protect himself and to protect his assets.
There was a theory, because this is new, there was a theory that, yes, it was his car. Maybe he's not connected to it in any way. Maybe he didn't know who was operating his car. He was on tour. He wasn't part of her body being moved there. If you take all this reporting as true, as I mentioned, what do you think's leading them to believe that he was, in fact, potentially, we'll put aside this homicide investigation. What do you think is leading them to believe he was somehow connected to the disposal of her body, moving her body?
Well, statistically speaking, a homicide is done by somebody that knows the victim. So this basic logic or statistics will show that's the first person. You're going to look at anybody that has a romantic relationship with this young lady first. Then the second part is, okay, the car was found with the body dismembered, and it was his car, and it was found near his house that he occupied. And so the data points are all leading in one direction. It doesn't mean he did this. It's just they still have to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. But the bottom line is that his relationship with her is well documented. And because of that, they're going to follow up on those leads and find out what happened. And based upon the fact that the body was dismembered, it's likely that but somebody had help doing that, because to dismember a body, there's a lot of effort into that.
Again, we're looking on the outside. But when I spoke to Steve Fisher, right, he said, based on my conversation with him, based on what I'm reading, it doesn't appear that there is surveillance footage of David driving the car, putting a body in, anything like that. He had mentioned that there was evidence in the house that would suggest there might have been planning of disposing a body. Do you think that this is true, that he's a suspect in her disposal, in the disposal of her body, maybe the mutilation of her body? Do you think there's communications they got a hold of? Do you think there's witnesses who have said something? Maybe there's other surveillance footage that we don't know of? Because if he's not point blank on camera moving a body or moving the car, there has to be something else that's been happening behind the scenes.
Well, we kind of look at it from another perspective. The way the body was found, it doesn't appear that this is a cartel hit or something, or somebody that's very sophisticated. It looks to me like it's somebody who's not very sophisticated. And if in fact he is a suspect, he's only 20, 21 years old. So he doesn't have a long criminal history and a very sophisticated nature of how to hide a body, to be participatory in crime. So to answer your question, I think there's lots of evidence out there that's pointing to the people who did this. And then we go back to the car itself. It's a rolling supercomputer. They've got so much data coming out of the computer that's in that car. Like I said before, I'm confident that they're going to find out who did this and who participated in her disposal.
If it's also true with TMZ reporting that this is possibly now a homicide case, a homicide investigation, we don't know for sure. If that is true, that's a 180 too. That's a 180 from what LAPD had said, that they might not be investigating this other than just a concealment of a body case. Either LAPD didn't know at the time, something changed, or LAPD wasn't being entirely transparent with the media because, like you said, they didn't want to tip off about what the investigation's really about. Talk to me about why you might see that kind of 180 there. And, you know, it's interesting because when we took that information and we're thinking, well, wait a minute, if it's not a homicide investigation, how did she die? Theories of drugs being involved, an overdose, we don't know for sure. If it's a homicide investigation, which, by the way, you could potentially have a homicide investigation even if drugs are involved, but do you think LAPD was being honest? Do you think something changed? If this is true, if the TMZ reporting's true, that this is now a homicide investigation, explain to me that 180.
Well, the first thing is LAPD hasn't given anything out official, so we're just operating on anonymous sources. Secondly, if indeed it was started out as a disposal or a dismemberment and went to homicide, that leads me to believe that they either have an independent data point in terms of somebody told them something that this led to a homicide, and or they had a preliminary review of the medical examiner's report and saw indicia of violent acts on the body. Even though the body was dismembered and was in a state of decomposition, the medical examiner is still going to be determined cause of death based upon what's happened to the bones or the lacerations or the state that it's in. So it just tells me there was a data point that came out that led them to believe this, if in fact it is true, because we're still operating on anonymous sources.
As far as I know, when you look at the site, the medical examiner hasn't listed for this case the cause and manner of death. It hasn't been publicized. Do you think that law enforcement has spoken to the ME? They know it. It's just not being published at this point. Or if there is a delay, why a delay in a case like this?
Well, I think it comes right back to the media attention here, is because once you and the DA's office in LA, as well as the LAPD, is very experienced with the media. They know once they release that ME report, that's going to cause another round of speculation and media firestorm. So they want to hold their cards very close to them while they're gathering all their facts, because once you let the horses out of the barn, you can't let them back in. And I'm fairly confident that they know what's in that ME report. It's just a matter of time before it does officially come out. And I would suspect it won't come out until they actually have a charging document along with it.
I know I sound like a broken record, but I'll say it again. Assuming these allegations are true, assuming this reporting is true, this Santa Barbara trip is bizarre, no?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, what was going on up there? Why up there? I mean,
Why might be they interested in it if it's true? Why are they interested in it?
Well, just taking a step and following this hypothesis, that might be where this criminal act occurred. And that might be in the computer of that Tesla showing that trip, the to and from, and with that information. And frankly, there might be video of the people who were involved in this walking around the car. I mean, we just don't know until that information is released. But the point is, there is a lot of data, a lot of evidence that's surrounding this. And whomever did it was not very sophisticated because, frankly, the body was found.
What would be the charge if you're talking about concealing a body? My understanding is in California, if you conceal an accidental death, that's a misdemeanor. There is willfully mutilating a body. I believe that could be a felony. Maybe evidence tampering. What do you see that could be potential charges here?
Well, depending on what was going on, they might actually, whoever helped, if there was somebody who helped dispose of the body, they could also be roped in as an accessory to a murder, which is actually the serious charge. That's a felony, and that's very long stretch in federal prison. So it's essentially like a conspiracy that you would charge in federal court. So if there was a group of people involved in this, everybody is looking at a very long stretch in federal or in state prison because of the fact that she died and she was dismembered, and the way in the state that she was found in, and the fact that the victim's family wants justice as well as the public.
Yeah, and by the way, if you're dealing with allegedly drugs being involved, there are ways you could bring homicide charges, particularly if you're furnishing drugs to a minor and there is some sort of overdose. I'm not saying that's what happened, but just something to be thinking about here as we try to make sense of what is going on here.
And that's a good point. In federal law, it's strict liability. So if a drug dealer gives drugs to a person, they die, they can be charged with basically a homicide in the federal sense, which is 15 years to life. So there could even be federal charges here if she did die of a drug overdose.
To be clear, the reporting indicates that no case has been presented to a prosecutor, but that doesn't necessarily mean that prosecutors aren't working with law enforcement. In other words, let's say there's a lot of people, and let's say they come to them and say, we could charge you with X, Y, and Z right now, but if you cooperate, that has to be a conversation with the prosecutor's office as well, right? I mean, do you think the prosecutors and investigators are working hand in hand, maybe in these interviews, if there are interviews happening?
Absolutely. And that's the way it's done in the federal system. And then in these high profile cases, there's tight coordination between the LA DA's office as well as LAPD. I'm sure there's communications ongoing because the DA's office wants to have oversight to make sure there's no mistakes made. Not that the LAPD would, but the bottom line is the DA's office has to defend all of LAPD's actions in court. So they're going to make sure all the ducks are in a row and they're doing everything by the book because this is such a high profile incident. They don't want to have another OJ problem on their hands. They want to make sure this is clean, straightforward, and then all the facts are presented to a jury if and when that does happen.
And let me just add this. We talk about this case a lot. It's in the media a lot. It's on social media a lot. People are invested. People care. My heart goes out to the family. My heart goes out to the family not only for their loss, but trying to navigate this. And if they are kept in the dark, Colin, from law enforcement, and I'll ask you whether or not you think that they are, if they have more information than the public does, whether they should, whether law enforcement should share more details with the family than law enforcement. This back and forth, this one day it's this, one day that, I have to imagine is incredibly distressing and incredibly frustrating. But do you think the family is getting more information than the media right now?
It's kind of a trust issue. There's been instances where the law enforcement shared information with families and the family went right out and had a press conference. So we have to see what comes out, and we don't know what that level of trust is between the family and law enforcement. And the LA District Attorney's Office does have a victim witness bureau or group that does interact with victims of violent crime. So to answer your question, we just don't know. I mean, the bottom line is this is a young lady who was killed or who was found dismembered. We don't know if she was killed. And that's a tragedy beyond comprehension, as a dad, that this happened. And so with all this media firestorm, we still have to remember that there's a victim here and there's a family that's standing behind that victim, which is just such a tragedy.
It is a tragedy. It is sad. And hopefully we get some answers here. Colin L. Schmitt, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.